Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely fundamental skill for any developer, client-side form validation using JavaScript. Think of client-side validation kind of like a bouncer at the door of an exclusive club. Long before your data is ever allowed to get inside the server, this bouncer checks its ID, makes sure it's dressed appropriately, and completely stops bad data right in its tracks. It's an incredibly crucial first line of defense, and today, we are going to master it together.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We're going to build this step by step, starting with the goal and setup, targeting elements, the onsubmit event, the validation logic itself, clearing errors, and we'll wrap it the whole shebang with a live demonstration.
Section 1. The goal and setup. Let's set the scene.
So we're starting with our raw materials, a simple HTML form with a name input, a submit button, and an invisible empty div just waiting patiently to catch user errors. And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem we're trying to solve here. Normally, when a user clicks submit, that data has to travel all the way to the server. The server does the checking, and if there's a problem, it sends an error back. That requires constant server communication, and honestly, it just eats up valuable time. Client-side validation, on the flip side, is lightning fast. It happens right inside the user's browser using JavaScript. We completely avoid all that wasted time communicating with the server when data is clearly already missing.
Section 2. Targeting elements with variables.
Before we can validate absolutely anything, we need to gather our detective tools to monitor the user's actions. To do this, we initialize two key variables. First, we use document.forms to grab our specific form by its name attribute, and we store it in a variable called myForm. Next, we use document.getElementById to reference that empty message div we talked about earlier, and we'll store that in a variable called message. In plain English, these variables are simply our handles. They allow us to interact directly with the HTML elements from inside our script.
Section 3. The onsubmit event. Let's move to how this builds, because now we are setting a friendly trap for the user's data. We need to introduce the onsubmit event. This is an event that triggers the exact millisecond a user clicks that submit button. But here is a vital detail you absolutely must remember. We attach this event to the form itself, not just the submit button. That distinction is a real game changer. By attaching it to the form, we can intercept the entire submission action right in the browser before it ever has a chance to leave the page.
So why do we care so much about this specific event? Well, taking control here is basically the hinge of our entire script. It gives us the power to interrupt the submission process completely. We get to perform our validation right there in the browser, which saves massive amounts of effort and drastically reduces unnecessary server communication. It literally lets us say, hold on a second, let me check this first.
Section 4. The validation logic. So, the crucial point is the interrogation. Now that we've interrupted the form submission, we demand to know if the user's data is actually valid, using a simple if-else statement. Let's break down this if block step by step. Step 1. We check the value of the input field. We're essentially asking, if myform.name.value is equal to an empty string, meaning the user left it completely blank, we have a problem. Step 2. We grab that empty message div from earlier and set its inner HTML to display the text, please enter a name. Boom. Now the user sees their mistake. Step 3. We execute a specific command to stop the submission dead in its tracks.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how that final command works. In JavaScript, we use return false. Think of this as the code literally yelling, hey, no, they've done something wrong, do not submit. Returning false completely halts the form from escaping to the server. It saves us that communication time and keeps the user exactly where they are so they can fix their mistake.
Section 5. Clearing errors and success.
But what about the flip side of the logic? We need an else block to dictate what happens when the user actually does things right. Step 1. The script detects that a name has been entered. The string is no longer empty. Step 2. We take that message div, but this time we set its inner HTML to equal nothing, just an empty string. This clears out any previous error messages. And clearing previous errors from the screen is just as important for user experience as showing them in the first place. If they fix their mistake, that error needs to vanish. Step 3, we authorize the submission to proceed.
And to authorize that submission, we use the command return true. As the coding instructor NetNinja perfectly translates it, returning true is basically giving the browser the green light, enthusiastically saying, yeah, everything's hunky-dory, go ahead and communicate with the server, submit this form.
Section 6, Demonstration and Conclusion. Let's snap the puzzle pieces of our script together and look at the visual result. When we test this live in the browser, the magic happens. If you click Submit without typing a name, our script intercepts it, an empty submission is detected, and the error message, please enter a name, immediately pops up below the form. The form doesn't go anywhere. But if you go back, type a test word like ninja, and hit Submit again, the script recognizes the valid data. The error message completely vanishes, and the form is successfully submitted to the server.
To put this all into context, I want to highlight a great thought from NetNinja. He notes that today, HTML5 actually helps out a lot with validation right out of the box. But he emphasizes that this is a very simple validation script, and when you're doing validation for real out in the wild, you're going to want to dive a lot deeper. But mastering this manual JavaScript approach, intercepting events, checking values, and conditionally returning true or false is a vital foundation you absolutely need.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. You've just mastered the absolute basics of keeping the bad data out and letting the good data in. But here's a question for you. As forms get larger, with passwords, emails, and phone numbers, how will you adapt these foundational tools to validate a world of complex data? Think about how you might expand these simple if statements in your own coding journey. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and happy coding.